Captain Carter wasn't the type to chase attention, yet attention always seemed to chase her. At 29, she was one of the youngest female captains at SkyWest Airlines, flying 737s across the United States. With calm blue eyes and a voice passengers described as steady as sunrise, she had become something of a quiet legend in the industry. The media called her the Golden Pilot. But behind the perfect uniform and polite smile was someone who carried storms of her own, memories of long nights, sacrifices, and a promise she'd made years ago on a dusty Oregon airfield. That morning, Flight 762 to Denver seemed routine. The sun was rising over Salt Lake City International, washing the tarmac in gold. Mechanics moved like clockwork, luggage carts hummed, and flight attendants chatted near Gate 19, walked briskly toward her aircraft, black pilot cap tucked under her arm. Passengers turned to watch. There was something magnetic about her presence, the mix of confidence and quiet grace. "Morning, Captain Carter," a mechanic called out. "Engines checked, she's ready to fly." Smiled faintly. "Good, let's keep it that way today." Her co-pilot Mark was already in the cockpit, sipping lukewarm coffee and scrolling through flight data. "You're early," he said with a grin. "I don't like surprises," she replied, settling into the left seat. Her fingers glided over switches and dials with the familiarity of someone touching an old piano. The scent of jet fuel and cabin air mixed around her, a smell that, to her, meant purpose. As the cabin crew began boarding, leaned back and stared at the instrument panel. Everything was fine, at least everything looked fine. But she couldn't shake the faint vibration she'd felt during her pre-flight. It wasn't visible, not audible, just a pulse beneath her boots when she'd passed under the left wing. She made a note of it, checked the logs, all normal. Yet experience had taught her to never ignore instinct. Mark caught her distant look. "You good?" "Yeah," she lied gently, "just thinking about Denver weather." He chuckled. "Forecast says clear, easy ride today." She nodded, but inside she felt the same uneasy stillness that sometimes comes before lightning. At 8:45 a.m., the passengers began boarding. Families, business travelers, a few sleepy college students stood near the cockpit door, greeting each one. "Welcome aboard." Her tone was soft, reassuring, the kind that instantly settled nervous flyers. A little girl with braids stopped and whispered, "Are you the pilot?" Smiled warmly. "One of them. We'll take good care of you, sweetheart." The girl grinned and ran to her seat. As the doors closed and the ground crew cleared the area, ran through the final checklist. Engine stable, hydraulics green, navigation set. Mark responded methodically, his calm voice filling the small space. The world outside seemed peaceful, blue skies stretching endlessly across Utah. Flight 762, cleared for takeoff, runway 34, came the tower's voice. His hand moved to the throttles. "Cleared for takeoff 34, she repeated. The engines roared alive, the trembling with restrained power. She felt the familiar surge of adrenaline, not fear, but respect. Every takeoff was a dialogue between machine and pilot. The nose lifted, the runway fell away, and for a moment everything felt perfect. Clouds opened like a silver highway ahead. Mark leaned back. "Smooth as butter," he said. Exhaled, the tightness in her chest easing for now. "Just another day in the sky," she murmured. But even as the aircraft climbed, she glanced at the engine readings again. A tiny fluctuation blinked on screen, gone before she could confirm it. Most pilots would ignore it. Didn't. Her father had drilled one thing into her when she first learned to fly. Machines don't lie, they whisper before they scream. She made a mental note, adjusting their climb rate slightly. Mark didn't notice. He was making a light joke about passengers who clapped after landings. Smiled politely, but her mind was elsewhere, on that faint tremor she'd felt earlier, on the flicker that shouldn't have been there. Somewhere deep inside, the instinct that had saved her once before, during a night storm years ago, stirred again. She looked out the cockpit window, the morning light bathing her face, and whispered under her breath, "Let's make it a safe one." Below them, Salt Lake City shimmered like glass. Above them, the sky stretched endless and calm. But Carter knew calm skies didn't always mean safe skis, and somewhere, invisible yet inevitable, turbulence was already waiting. Flight 762 leveled off at 36,000 feet, cruising eastward above a sea of soft white clouds. The 737 hummed gently, a mechanical lullaby that reassured even the most anxious passengers. Flight attendants rolled carts down the aisle, pouring coffee, cracking jokes, and easing small talk between strangers. From the cockpit, the world looked perfect, endless blue above, the Rockies glittering far below. Captain Carter sat in quiet focus, hands resting lightly on the yoke, eyes darting between instruments and horizon. Co-pilot Mark leaned back with his coffee, relaxed, one leg crossed over the other. "You know," he said, "you make this look way too easy." Gave a faint smile. "That's the point." Mark chuckled. "Seriously, though, not every day I fly with the youngest female captain in the company. You're like a celebrity in the training manuals." "Training manuals exaggerate," she replied dryly, adjusting the trim. "They don't show the sleepless nights and caffeine overdoses." He grinned. "They should, would make flight school sound more exciting." Smiled again, but her mind was elsewhere. Her gaze drifted to the engine indicator panel. The right engine's exhaust gas temperature needle twitched slightly, just a fraction, then stabilized. It was barely noticeable, a movement too subtle for alarm, but she caught it. "You see that?" she asked. Mark leaned forward. "Looks fine now." "Yeah," she said slowly, but it flickered. He shrugged. "Could be sensor noise, turbulence from the jet stream maybe." Maybe, but instincts whispered differently. Her father's voice echoed faintly in her memory. "Machines talk if you listen close enough." Still, she let it go for the moment. The cockpit was warm, sunlight spilling through the forward windows, tinting everything gold. She reached for her water bottle, took a sip, and looked out across the sky. Somewhere below, rivers glistened like threads of silver. From this height, the world looked so peaceful, so innocent. But she knew how quickly that illusion could shatter. "ATC just cleared us for a minor route adjustment," Mark said, scanning his screen. "They're tracking weather building up near Colorado. Nothing major, maybe light turbulence on descent." Nodded. "Copy that." She adjusted their heading a few degrees and tapped her headset. "Denver Center, SkyWest 762, adjusting to flight level 360. "Roger 762. Maintain heading 080, the controller replied. "All routine, all calm." Mark stretched his arms. "So, how'd you get into this anyway? Most girls your age are flying tick, not 737s. Laughed softly. "My dad was a crop duster in Oregon. First time he took me up, I was 9. He let me hold the controls just for a few seconds. I never forgot the feeling." "That sense of control?" Mark asked. She shook her head. "That sense of freedom." Silence filled the cockpit for a while, the steady hum of the engines becoming their soundtrack. Below, the clouds began to thicken slightly, like distant smoke rising from the mountains. "Looks like we're skirting that storm early," Mark said. "Yeah, it's moving faster than forecasted," murmured. She adjusted altitude again. The plane responded obediently, but a faint tremor ran through the frame. Barely noticeable, but she felt it through the yoke. Then just as suddenly, it vanished. "Autopilot holding steady," Mark confirmed. His eyes stayed on the instruments. "Still feels odd." "Relax, Captain," he teased. "You're too tuned in for your own good." "Maybe," she said, though her expression didn't soften. "That's what keeps people alive." A few moments later, the cockpit phone buzzed. It was Lena, the lead flight attendant. "Captain, just a heads up, passenger in 14A's feeling queasy. Turbulence might be getting to him." Press the comm. "Thanks, Lena, keep an eye on him. We might have a few bumps ahead." "Copy that." Glanced at the radar again. The storm front was forming faster than she liked. Pockets of yellow and orange now bled across the display, signals of unstable air. She clicked the sign. A gentle chime echoed through the cabin. "Ladies, and this is your captain speaking." Her voice flowed smoothly over the intercom, calm and kind. "We're encountering some developing weather ahead, so please fasten your and remain seated for a little while. Nothing to worry about, just a few bumps on the way." Passengers relaxed at the sound of her voice. She had that effect, calm, that cut through fear. When she switched the mic off, Mark gave a nod, nice and steady as always, but didn't answer. Her eyes had returned to the panel again, where, for just one fleeting second, the right engine's pressure reading dipped into the red before blinking back to normal. Her breath caught. "There it is again," she whispered. Mark frowned this time. "Okay, that's not my imagination." His pulse quickened, but her hand stayed steady on the controls. "Log it. Engine 2, intermittent pressure fluctuation." He wrote it down, tension rising between them. Outside, the clear blue began to fade into gray. Lightning flickered somewhere far ahead, faint but visible. Narrowed her eyes. "We'll keep our altitude for now. If it worsens, we'll reroute south." Mark nodded. "You think we're in for it?" She didn't answer immediately. Her gaze stayed fixed on the sky ahead, that eerie wall of cloud creeping closer, like something alive. Finally, she said softly, almost to herself, "I don't know, but something about today feels off." The aircraft continued forward, smooth and steady. The calm before the storm neither of them yet understood was already waiting. At 11:42 a.m., the first jolt came. It wasn't violent, just a sharp, mechanical shiver that rippled through the fuselage like a warning. Captain Carter's eyes darted to the control panel. "What was that?" she asked, voice calm but clipped. Co-pilot Mark frowned, scanning the instruments. Engine vibration indicator just spiked, then dropped again. "Maybe turbulence." Shook her head. That didn't feel like turbulence. Her gut, that quiet voice she always trusted, was whispering louder now. Outside the windshield, the sky was changing. Thin wisps of white had thickened into dark, heavy clouds. Lightning flickered in the distance, followed by a low rumble that rolled through the cabin walls. "Denver Center, this is SkyWest 762, radioed, keeping her voice even. "We're experiencing minor engine fluctuations. Requesting altitude review." "Copy that, 762, the controller replied. "You're cleared to descend to flight level 340. Adjusted the throttles gently, descending to 340. The engines responded, or so it seemed. Then with terrifying suddenness, the right engine coughed. A metallic bang echoed through the cabin, followed by another violent shudder. "Engine 2's out," Mark shouted. Warning lights blazed across the cockpit. His voice stayed level. "Confirm shutdown, fuel cut." Mark's hands moved fast, toggling switches. Fuel shut, N2's dropping, temps stable but engines dead. Radioed again. "Mayday, Mayday, SkyWest 762, engine failure, descending through 35,000. Her heart was pounding, but her face betrayed nothing. Passengers would hear that voice soon, and panic or calm would depend on how she sounded. "Left engine holding steady," Mark said, his voice tight. Nodded, eyes scanning every gauge. The storm ahead was growing larger, spreading like ink in water. "We'll divert to Grand Junction," she decided. "It's the closest field." Mark entered the coordinates and froze. Left engine's losing pressure too. She looked up sharply. No way. The second engine coughed once, twice, then went dead. The silence that followed was horrifying. No hum, no vibration, only the rush of wind as the 737 became a massive, powerless glider slicing through cold air. Both pilots stared at the dead instruments. For a heartbeat, time stood still. Then snapped back. "All right, dual engine failure checklist." Mark's voice cracked. "Are you kidding me, both?" "Stay with me," said firmly, her tone cutting through panic like a knife. "We train for this." They hadn't, not really. Dual-engine failure at cruising altitude was nearly impossible, but's mind was pure muscle memory now. Set best glide speed, electrical power emergency bus. Mark obeyed, speed set power switched. The plane descended steadily, slicing through gray clouds. In the cabin, passengers were crying, clutching each other as the oxygen masks dropped. "Grab the mic. Ladies, and this is your captain. We've lost engine power, but we are fully in control. Please remain calm, stay seated, and secure your oxygen masks. We are preparing for a controlled descent." Her voice didn't waver. It was the same calm tone she used for weather updates, and somehow that steadiness reached through the fear, anchoring everyone aboard. "Altitude?" she asked. 29,000 and dropping," Mark replied. "No power to hydraulics, manual reversion only." His arms ached as she fought the yoke. The 737 was heavy, sluggish without thrust. Below them the Rockies loomed, jagged, merciless peaks capped with snow. "Nearest field?" she asked. Mark scanned quickly. "Nothing within range. We've got maybe 70 miles of glide left." Stared ahead. The horizon was a blur of storm and stone. Her voice dropped low. "Then we'll make 70 enough." Static hissed in her headset. "SkyWest 762, Denver Center, radar contact lost, repeat, lost radar contact." His heart thudded once hard. They were off the grid now. Lightning flashed outside, painting her face in harsh white light. The aircraft shook violently as wind tore at its wings. Mark gripped the armrest. "This is bad." "Not yet," she replied, tightening her grip. "Not while I'm flying." The plane dropped another 1,000 feet. Passengers screamed. His jaw clenched. She had one rule in emergencies: never let fear fly the plane. Her father's voice echoed in her mind. "When everything goes silent, that's when you listen hardest." Closed her eyes for half a second, took a breath, and reopened them with razor focus. "Okay," she said. "We've still got glide, we've got power for instruments, and we've got each other. That's enough to land a damn plane." Mark stared at her, stunned by her composure. "You really think we can make it?" Met his eyes. "I don't think," she said quietly. "I know." As the 737 dropped through the storm, lightning crackling all around, the cockpit filled again, not with sound but with purpose. Carter, the youngest female captain in SkyWest's history, wasn't flying anymore, she was fighting. And for the 168 souls behind her, that fight had only just begun. The storm swallowed the 737 like a beast closing its jaws. Rain streaked across the windshield, thunder rolled beneath them, and lightning flashed close enough to make the cockpit glow. With both engines dead, the once powerful aircraft was now gliding, silently, helplessly, through chaos. Captain Carter gripped the yoke with both hands, every muscle in her arms trembling under pressure. "Speed holding at 240 knots, she muttered, fighting to keep the nose steady. The altimeter spun downward, 27,000 feet, 26,000, 25,000. Beside her, Mark was running numbers, his voice tight with disbelief. "We've got maybe 70 miles of glide if the air stays smooth." "The air won't stay smooth," replied. Her voice was calm, but her mind raced. The storm was growing darker, angrier. She could feel the turbulence building like tension before a scream. Below, the Rocky Mountains stretched endlessly, a sea of gray stone, valleys, and treacherous ridges. There wasn't a single stretch of flat land wide enough for a 737. The systems were mostly dead, no radar, no comms with ATC. They were flying blind. "Hydraulics minimal," Mark said. "Flaps unresponsive, we've got manual control only." Nodded. "That's all we need." In the cabin behind them, passengers prayed, sobbed, whispered into phones that no longer had signal. The oxygen masks swayed from the ceiling like ghosts. Flight attendant Lena pushed through the aisle, shouting for calm, repeating's message. The pilots are in control. Stay seated. She wasn't sure if anyone believed it. Inside the cockpit, the air was hot and tense. His uniform clung to her back. She stared out into the gray void, calculating descent angles, crosswinds, and glide ratios in her head. Every pilot trained for engine failures, but both engines gone mid-cruise over mountains. That was survival math. "Mark," she said, "pull up Eagle County on your EFB. It's the only airstrip remotely close." He did, fingers shaking as he zoomed in on the satellite map. "There's an old emergency strip near Gypsum, 15 miles west of the main airport. It's short, maybe half a mile." His eyes narrowed. Half a mile's more than zero. He looked at her like she was crazy. "We'd need a perfect approach, one shot." She smirked faintly. "Then let's make it perfect." The plane lurched as turbulence slammed it sideways. Warning tones screamed briefly before dying. The electrical bus flickered out. The cockpit went dark except for the emergency glow of analog gauges. "Battery backup on," Mark muttered, flipping a switch. The instruments flickered weakly back to life. Could feel the aircraft losing lift. "Come on, girl," she whispered to the jet, her hands steady on the yoke. "Don't give up now." The rain intensified, hammering the windshield like bullets. Every instinct screamed that they were running out of time. The ground was rising fast. "Altitude," she demanded. 14,000 and dropping, Mark said. "Mountains at 12. That left them maybe 2,000 feet of clearance, seconds, really. "Flaps?" she asked. "Nothing." "Gear?" "Not responding." His jaw tightened. "We'll belly land if we have to." Mark's eyes widened. "You're serious?" "I'm not dying today, and neither are they," she said, pointing toward the cabin. "Find me that strip." He zoomed in on the GPS map. "There, 2 o'clock low just beyond that ridge, looks like a clearing." Peered through the rain-streaked window. Through a break in the storm, she saw it, a long, narrow scar of green wedged between mountain slopes. Her heart pounded. That was it. Their only chance. "Turning for final approach," she said, banking gently. The plane groaned as wind fought back. Lightning cracked close enough to shake the cockpit. Mark gritted his teeth. "Speed," she called. 220. "Trim for 180. We'll need the drag." The air screamed past them as she adjusted the nose, balancing between lift and gravity. The storm threw the plane around like a toy, but wrestled it back each time. For the first time, Mark looked at her, really looked. Sweat dripped down her face, her eyes blazing with focus. There was no fear, only defiance. "You're insane," he muttered. She smiled faintly. "That's why we'll live." Another flash of lightning illuminated the valley below. The strip was closer now, visible through the sheets of rain, impossibly short, uneven, framed by pine trees on both sides. Whispered, "Come on, just a few more minutes." The airframe vibrated, alarms flickering weakly. She ignored them all. Every muscle in her body was locked on the descent, her breathing slow and controlled. In the cabin, passengers held hands, whispering prayers, eyes squeezed shut. Lena braced at the door, tears in her eyes but refusing to show fear. "Altitude," barked. 7,000 and dropping fast, Mark answered. "Then buckle up," she said quietly, eyes narrowing. "We're about to make history." The runway, if it could even be called that, loomed ahead, rising fast through sheets of rain. Lined up the nose perfectly with the clearing. The aircraft's frame groaned like it knew what was coming. Mark's knuckles went white around the throttle levers. "Here we go," whispered. "Hold on tight." And with that she pulled back slightly, flaring the nose, guiding the powerless toward the earth, straight into the storm's heart. The world outside the cockpit blurred into streaks of gray and green as the 737 plunged through the storm. Rain pounded like drumfire. Thunder cracked directly above, and every gust of wind felt like a shove from an invisible giant. "Speed 190, Mark shouted over the roar. "Hold it steady," yelled back. Her hands were iron on the yoke, her eyes locked on the narrow patch of clearing below, their only hope of survival. "Altitude 3,000 and dropping. Gear down if it'll go." Mark flipped the switch. Nothing. The landing gear lights stayed dark. "Manual release," she commanded. He yanked the emergency lever. A loud thud echoed beneath them as the gear half deployed, not all the way. Left gear's jammed. Pulse spiked, but she didn't blink. "We'll land on the belly, keep it straight." The storm screamed against the fuselage as lightning split the sky, illuminating the ground below, trees, ridges, and that small ribbon of flat earth that looked smaller with every second. The altimeter spun down past 2,000 feet. "Brace for impact in 60 seconds, said into the PA, her voice steady but low. "Heads down, stay calm." Passengers gasped and cried. Some whispered prayers, others clutched strangers' hands like lifelines. In the cockpit, time slowed. "Flaps," she called. "Still dead." She exhaled through her nose. "Okay, nose up at 500 feet, no more." Mark's breathing was erratic. "We're coming in too fast." "I know." Lightning flashed again. The clearing was dead ahead. The wind buffeted the wings. The aircraft shuddered violently as air currents tore at its frame. 1,000 feet. She adjusted pitch, the yoke heavy in her grip. The felt sluggish, fighting every correction. Her instincts screamed they were coming in too high, but lowering the nose meant death. 500. "Flare," she muttered. The trees rushed up like spears. The belly of the plane scraped the first tops, slicing through pine branches. Sparks exploded against the wings as the fuselage slammed through the treetops. Bang! The left wing clipped a trunk, ripping off a section of the tip. The aircraft lurched hard left, countered instantly, muscles straining. "Hold, hold," she shouted. The ground was seconds away. She yanked back gently, eyes fixed on the horizon. "Come on, girl." Then impact. The first hit slammed through the cabin like an explosion. Metal screamed as the fuselage skidded across wet ground, tearing through soil and rock. Overhead bins burst open. Luggage flew like missiles. Passengers screamed as sparks illuminated the cabin. His head snapped forward, her harness cutting into her shoulders. Her vision blurred, but she held the yoke firm. "Keep her straight," she gritted. Mark fought beside her, wrestling the rudder pedals. "We're sliding." The jet spun slightly, the tail catching on a mound of dirt. The spin slowed only when the nose dug into a soft, muddy slope, stopping the aircraft with a brutal jolt. Then silence. For a moment, it was impossible to breathe. Rain hammered the wreckage. A soft hiss of escaping air filled the cabin. "Engines off," said automatically, even though they were already dead. Her voice trembled now, but she fought to sound calm. "Mark, check for fire." "No flames, we're good," he gasped, eyes wide. She nodded, ripped off her headset, and hit the cabin intercom. "Evacuate, evacuate now." Inside, chaos erupted. Flight attendants shouted instructions. Passengers stumbled through smoke and rain. Lena kicked open an emergency door, deploying a slide that half inflated before collapsing into mud. "Jump," she screamed. "Go, go, go." Unbuckled and pushed out of her seat. Her left leg ached badly, she might twisted it, but she ignored the pain. "Mark, get the beacon online." He nodded, fumbling with the emergency transmitter. She stumbled into the aisle. The cabin smelled of burnt wires and spilled fuel. Passengers cried, hugged, shouted names. One man refused to move, staring blankly at the ceiling. "Sir," barked, gripping his shoulder, "you're alive, move." He blinked, nodded weakly, and followed her lead. Outside, the rain had turned the clearing into a swamp. Survivors huddled under wings and debris, coughing in disbelief. Mark limped up beside her, soaked and shaking. Everyone's out from the right side, tail section still jammed. Sprinted toward it, slipping in mud. A mother was screaming for her child inside the back rows. "Ma'am, I'll get her," yelled, climbing back into the wreck. Smoke curled through the fuselage. She ducked under a bent row of seats and found a little girl clutching a stuffed bear, trapped by a. "It's okay, sweetheart," said softly, cutting the strap with a piece of broken metal. "We're going home." She carried the child out into the rain, handing her to her mother. The woman collapsed, sobbing into soaked uniform. For the first time, let herself breathe. The jet was broken, the world around her was chaos, but she'd done the impossible. Mark looked at her in awe. You actually did it." Just stared at the wreck, rain dripping from her eyelashes. "We're not done yet," she said quietly. "Now we survive the storm." And as thunder rolled once more, she turned toward the dark ridge beyond the valley, not realizing rescue wouldn't come for hours. And the storm had one last secret left. Night fell fast over the wrecked 737. The rain had not stopped for hours, and the once faint hiss of wind was now a constant roar rolling through the valley. The storm had swallowed every sound except thunder and the faint cries of passengers still shaken by what had happened. Stood outside the broken fuselage, her uniform torn and soaked, flashlight trembling in her hand. Steam rose from the wet metal around her, glowing faintly under flashes of lightning. She landed a powerless jet in the middle of the Rocky Mountains, and somehow 184 people were alive. But now came the harder part, staying alive. "Any signal?" she asked, shouting over the wind. Mark shook his head, the emergency radio cradled in his hands. "Nothing. The beacon's transmitting, but we're too deep in the valley. The mountains are killing the signal." Looked toward the ridge, black silhouettes of pine trees and mist. Somewhere beyond that, a world existed, but here they were alone. "We'll have to wait till daylight," she said. "Search teams will be in the air at first light." She didn't add what she was thinking, that their location, hidden between jagged ridges, might be invisible even to radar. Inside the fuselage, passengers huddled under torn insulation and blankets pulled from luggage. Flight attendants were tending to the injured, improvising with shirts and bits of first aid tape. The smell of wet earth and fuel hung thick. Knelt beside a young man with a gash across his forehead. "You're going to be okay," she said softly, cleaning the wound with a damp cloth. He tried to smile. You really landed that thing." She nodded once. "We didn't land, we survived the fall." He chuckled weakly before closing his eyes, exhausted. Mark approached again, whispering, "Fuel leaking from the left wing. If lightning hits." "I know," said. Her voice was low, but her eyes hardened. "We'll move everyone 50 yards out. The rain might save us, but we're not taking chances." Together they guided the shivering passengers into the trees, away from the smell of fuel. The mud clung to their shoes, the cold was biting. Kept her flashlight low, scanning faces, scared, lost, waiting for her next instruction. "Stay close," she shouted. "Don't wander off, we'll keep a fire once the rain slows." "Captain," Lena said, her voice trembling, "what if rescue doesn't come?" Looked at her, the young flight attendant's eyes were wide, red from tears, placed a hand on her shoulder. "Then we make it come to us." The lightning illuminated her face, streaked with dirt and determination. By midnight, the rain thinned to a mist. Mark managed to light a small fire using a survival kit flare and some dry fabric from the overhead bins. It sputtered and hissed, but glowed enough to draw people close. Sat on a broken log, scanning the horizon. Her body ached everywhere, but her mind refused to rest. Mark sat beside her, rubbing his arms. "You know, the odds of surviving a dual-engine failure and a forced landing in these mountains are 1 in 1,000. Smirked faintly. "Then it's a good thing I don't play by odds." Thunder rolled again, softer now. The valley felt hauntingly peaceful in the storm's aftermath. But peace never lasted long. From the darkness beyond the tree line came a sound, faint, irregular, a branch snapping, then another. Mark tensed. "You hear that?" Stood, her hand instinctively going to the emergency flare at her belt. She turned the flashlight toward the sound. Nothing but trees and fog. Then another crack, closer. "Could be a rescue team," Mark whispered hopefully. Shook her head slowly. "Too soon." They waited, hearts pounding. Finally, two glowing eyes appeared in the beam of her flashlight, low to the ground, unblinking. A mountain lion. Froze, the animal stepped forward, sleek and silent, muscles rippling under its wet fur. The survivors behind her gasped. "Don't move," she whispered. "No one move." The big cat growled, circling slightly, testing the edge of the light. Mark's hand hovered near the flare gun. His voice was calm, steady as iron. "If it charges, fire to the left, not at it. We scare it, not provoke it." For a tense few seconds, the mountain lion held her gaze. Then, with a flick of its tail, it turned and disappeared into the trees. The survivors exhaled at once. Lowered her flashlight slowly, heart still hammering. Mark let out a shaky laugh. "You sure you're not part machine?" She gave a faint smile. "Machines don't get scared, I do." She looked back toward the wreck, the twisted metal glinting in the moonlight. "But I don't stop." As dawn began to creep over the mountains, the storm finally broke. The rain stopped. The sky turned from black to bruised purple. Mark pointed to the horizon. "Look." A thin line of smoke rose in the distance, far but visible. His eyes widened. "Campfire, someone's out there." Her heart steadied. Maybe rescue wasn't a dream after all. But the question that would soon haunt them was simple. Who lit that fire first? The first gray light of dawn spread across the valley, revealing the wreckage of Flight 2741 in its full, grim silence. The fuselage lay split across the mud like a wounded animal, steam rising from its broken metal skin. Around it, the survivors huddled in makeshift shelters made of torn cabin panels. Stood a few yards away, her eyes locked on the faint smoke spiraling in the distance. It wasn't much, thin, gray, and far beyond the ridge, but it was the first sign of human life since they'd gone down. Mark joined her, his boots sinking into the wet ground. "It's about 3 miles east, maybe more if the terrain's rough." "Then we start moving," said, her tone clipped, all business again. "You sure it's a rescue camp?" She didn't answer right away. "I'm sure it's something, and something's better than waiting for nothing." They gathered a small team, Mark, Lena, and 2 passengers strong enough to walk. The rest were ordered to stay behind, conserve energy, and keep the beacon powered. Gave one last look at the broken jet, then tightened her backpack straps. "Keep everyone calm," she told the group staying. "If we're not back by dusk, keep the fire lit. Someone will see it." The wind was sharp as they began the climb. Wet pine needles crunched under their boots. Every few minutes, thunder echoed faintly in the distance, the last remnants of the storm refusing to die. Lena, walking just behind, finally asked, "How do you keep so calm, Captain?" Smiled faintly without slowing her pace. "You don't fly planes by panicking." They climbed in silence for nearly an hour, winding through rocks slick with moss. The smoke grew thicker, darker, then stopped, crouching low. "Do you smell that?" she whispered. Mark sniffed the air. "Yeah, that's not wood, that's fuel." Her pulse quickened. She motioned for the others to stay low as they pushed forward through a cluster of trees. And then they saw it. A plane, or what was left of one. A small twin-engine lay half buried in the mud, blackened by fire. Its wings were twisted, tail broken clean off. The smoke came from a pile of burning debris nearby. Lena gasped, "Another crash." Stepped closer cautiously, her boots sinking into the wet earth. The wreckage looked old, weeks, maybe months. "No survivors," she murmured, scanning the remains. "No flare signals. Someone set that fire recently." Mark frowned. meaning someone's still out here. A rustling sound made them all turn. "Over there," Lena whispered. Raised her flashlight. A figure stumbled out from behind a cluster of trees, thin, bearded, eyes wide and wild. He raised his hands instantly. "Don't shoot, please don't." His heart pounded. "It's okay. We're survivors from Flight 2741. Who are you?" The man stared, trembling. You came down in the storm too." "Yes," said carefully. "There are over 100 people down there. Who are you?" The man swallowed hard. "Name, Aaron Blake. I was flying cargo out of Denver. My plane went down 3 weeks ago. I thought I was the only one left alive." Mark's jaw dropped. 3 weeks. Aaron nodded weakly. "You won't get a signal here. The valley blocks everything. I tried to climb out once. There's a ridge 2 miles east. The storm keeps circling back like it's trapped us here." Stepped closer. "Have you seen rescue planes?" He shook his head slowly. "Once maybe, but they didn't see me. No flares left." Lena looked at, fear creeping into her eyes. "Captain, what if no one finds us either?" Glanced at the charred, then back toward their own crash site hidden below. The truth hit her hard. They could vanish just like this man had. "We'll make them find us," she said firmly. "We have passengers, food, and people depending on us. We're not dying here." Aaron's voice cracked. "You don't understand. The ridge, there's something up there. Lights at night, I've seen them. They're not rescue teams." Frowned. "Then what are they?" He hesitated, eyes darting toward the east. "I don't know, but I hear machines sometimes. Engines, not planes, down in the valley at night." Mark exchanged a glance with her. "Engines here." Aaron nodded. "You'll hear them too once dark comes again." The wind picked up, carrying a low hum through the forest, faint, rhythmic, almost mechanical. Turned toward the sound, every instinct sharpened. "Pack up," she said. "We're going to see what's making that noise." Aaron's face went pale. "You don't want to go there, Captain." Met his eyes, her jaw set. "I've flown through worse than fear." Thunder rumbled again over the peaks as the group gathered their gear. The smoke from the wreck curled into the gray sky, a ghostly signal that might bring help, or something else entirely. As they started toward the eastern ridge, the hum grew louder, deeper, echoing through the trees. Looked back once toward the valley where Flight 2741 lay hidden. "Hold on," she whispered to the people she'd left behind. "I'm coming back for you." But in her gut, she knew something about this place wasn't right. Led the small group cautiously up the eastern ridge. The fog swirled around them, damp and cold, muffling footsteps and making each shadow seem alive. Aaron Blake stumbled behind them, muttering warnings about the strange hum that had haunted the valley at night. "Keep moving," urged. Her hands gripped her flashlight and survival knife. Her heart pounded not just from exertion, but from an instinctual awareness that this ridge held answers. The hum grew louder, reverberating through the trees. Stopped, listening. It wasn't just engines, it was a deep mechanical resonance, pulsing rhythmically. "Over there," she whispered, pointing toward a clearing. What they saw made their blood run cold. Hidden among the peaks, shielded from view, was a massive private airstrip, sleek, black, and modern. Several aircraft sat perfectly lined on the tarmac, some military grade, others unmarked corporate jets. Lights flickered along the edges, powered but strangely quiet. Aaron stepped forward, awe and fear mixing in his expression. I thought I imagined it. I've seen this before at night, lights, engines. I thought it was ghosts, but it's real." His mind raced. Who could maintain a private airfield here in the middle of nowhere without anyone noticing? As they approached, the hum transformed into a low rumble of idling engines. One by one, large hangar doors began opening. A shadowy figure appeared, silhouetted against bright interior lights. Instinctively put herself in front of the group. "Hello," she called, her voice steady. "We're survivors. We need help. People are stranded." The figure stepped forward and his jaw tightened. It was a man in a dark pilot uniform, insignias she didn't recognize, official, yet unmarked. His eyes scanned them coldly. "You shouldn't be here," he said, voice calm, almost polite. Squared her shoulders. "We survived a crash. We need assistance. There are over 100 people down in the valley." The man's gaze hardened. "That valley is restricted airspace. You shouldn't have flown there. You've seen too much." His pulse quickened. "Too much. We're alive and people need help now." A distant roar echoed through the ridge, one of the unmarked jets powering up. Tensed, the man moved aside, speaking into a radio, but the voice on the other end was clipped, urgent. From behind the hangars, several men emerged, armed, scanning the ridge. Realized with horror, this wasn't a standard airstrip. It was secret, highly secret military or private corporate operations hidden from the world, and they had just wandered straight into it. Swallowed fear. "We're not leaving anyone behind. We'll go down the ridge slowly. Keep quiet. Follow my lead." Aaron froze. "Captain, you're going to get us killed." "I've got us this far," said firmly. "Trust me." They descended carefully, sticking to tree lines, moving silently. From the ridge, the wreck of Flight 2741 looked like a tiny speck, almost hidden. Felt a pang, her crew, her passengers, all depending on her to get back safely. Suddenly, a spotlight cut through the fog, sweeping the trees. Ducked behind a boulder, dragging the group with her. Heart hammering, she watched as armed guards moved down toward the valley. "We can't confront them," she whispered. "We lure them away." Using survival instincts honed in decades of flying and crisis situations, she led the group eastward, circling to higher ground. The hum of engines faded as they gained distance, the lights of the secret airstrip shrinking behind the ridge. Hours later, as the sun rose, finally allowed herself a moment to breathe. In the distance, rescue helicopters arrived, alerted by the emergency beacon they'd kept powered. The survivors were airlifted one by one, tears, hugs, and relief overwhelming the terror of the past day. Stayed until the last passenger was safe, watching the valley below. The wreck was a testament to skill, determination, and sheer willpower, but the secret airstrip haunted her thoughts. Mark joined her, wet, exhausted, but smiling. "You did it, Captain, everyone's safe." Nodded, voice quiet. "Yes, but something's still out there, something they don't want anyone to know." Aaron waved as he was loaded into a helicopter, muttering thanks. Watched the chopper rise, the valley finally quiet. She turned away, heart heavy but steady. The storm was over. The passengers were safe. And Captain Carter, the beautiful young pilot who had stared death in the face, saved everyone. Flight 2741. But somewhere beyond the ridge, engines hummed in secrecy, waiting for the next flight, and knew deep down that her journey with the skis and with danger was far from over. Her eyes lifted to the horizon. She adjusted her cap, smiled faintly, and whispered to herself, "Bring it on."